start the recording.
All right, hide your picture, please. Okay. So we are now live. Everyone's looking good. All right. So, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
How are you, Mayor?
Good evening.
Fantastic.
Okay, all right, wonderful. So we're going to go ahead and get started because we want to make sure that we have enough time for residents to chime in and talk about the COVID. It has considerably hit our community very hard. So people really want to know what's going on, giving them the truth about what's happening in the city of South Fulton. So I decided to come up with this fireside chat, having our wonderful Mayor Bill Edwards, and then our pathologist, Dr. Elaine Rowland. And then also too, we went to South Fulton, the finest individual I know other than me in the city of South Fulton. To actually host this chat. I know this conversation will be very intriguing. I know that people will have a lot of questions. So I definitely want to get started, but I will introduce our moderator and then she will begin to tell you all about our guest today. So just 1 second, let me get her bio. All right, so Michelle Taylor Willis, she's a Florida native now living in Atlanta, is married with 4 sons. She is an award-winning speaker, media personality, entrepreneur, and consultant. Michelle founded South Fulton Lifestyle Magazine and is the host of According to Michelle radio show. She chairs the advisory board for the United Way of Greater Atlanta and South Fulton and serves as chairperson for the Theater des Rêves, the only French-speaking theater in America. She also serves on the I Dare You and South Fulton Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. So as you know, she's a very busy lady. She also serves as the VP of Film and Entertainment. She was recently appointed to the Morris Brown College Foundation and serves as secretary. She was named Outstanding Business Person of the Year in 2017 and Small Business of the Year 2016 by the South Fulton Chamber. She has been recognized as top 100 influential women in Georgia and Atlanta several times by different organizations and top 25 most powerful women in Atlanta. Atlanta Business League Journal recently named her the top 25 most extraordinary Atlantans. Her publication, South Fulton Lifestyle, was named Publication of the Year in Atlanta 2 years in a row. Michelle also been recognized for her work with youth in the community. Michelle created Soul Food, the name used to refer to the 8 cities of South Fulton County. She also created the Moms All In Conference for female executives and entrepreneurs. So the next voice you will hear is Miss Michelle Taylor Willis. Thank you so much for moderating today.
No problem, and thank you for having me. It was a great surprise, and of course, I think by now, if you call and ask me to do something, then I'm going to do it. But that's the benefits of being an AKA. So there's that. And since Mayor is an alpha, I guess he's kind of included in that too. Although I really do get much pleasure in my heart from telling him no from time to time.
Okay.
So, but thanks for having me. Listen, I'm really excited about this because, we're going to be able to have a real talk and a real discussion about, the realness of COVID. And I think it's just interesting because there's so often we're getting so much different information that's out there. And I think people just need to know facts, fundamentals. And, usually I think we're smart enough to make our own opinions and be able to act accordingly. So I'm excited to hear what Dr. Rowling has to say. So let me go ahead and introduce our other fireside chatters. Of course, we have Mayor Bill Edwards, who is the first and only mayor for the city of South Fulton in Georgia, which is one of the largest cities actually in Georgia. So I'm happy to be able to be alongside him. I know I give him a lot of trouble, but it's just because I love him so much. Can I get it? I'm gonna get a check for saying that last line, right?
Yeah,
Check
you
for that.
probably will.
And then, of course, we have Dr. Lane Rolling, who right now serves on the Congressional Black Caucus COVID-19 Task Force, but he's an infectious disease physician. He's a trauma surgeon. He's military trained. He has braved all kinds of diseases all around the world, including, Peru, Africa, Germany, everywhere. But at the end of the day, he's just making it happen, quote unquote, his words, not mine. So, but I will join in that. I think he's making it happen too. So thanks to both of you for coming on. And Mayor, would you like to take maybe just a minute or so and start off with the opening statement?
Well, I'm glad to be here, especially after hearing your bio. I made sure just to be in a room with you. So thank you so much for having me. All of us in some way have been affected by this whole pandemic thing. And I try every day to let people understand that it's more than just the health side of the pandemic. Because of the pandemic, so many other things are happening, such as the loss of economic development. People are not getting the nutrition that they need. So I think, just beyond what is actually happening right now, there are needs that have to be cared for outside of being in the hospital. So I just want to make that clear, and I'm glad to be a part of this fireside chat. I guess the fire is at your house, Michelle, because I don't see it. So we're just gonna.
You know what, it's funny. I was actually gonna put a fire. You can do those virtual backgrounds. So I was gonna put a fire behind, and it would be, but I thought it might be a little disturbing.
Okay. Well, let's talk to Dr. Rowland, because let's get him on.
Oh, hello, everybody. I hope everybody's doing good in South Atlanta, and I look forward to presenting some great information to help you out, Mayor, and to the great people of your state of Georgia, because I think we need to make sure that people understand reality. And my job is to make sure that we're not putting more people in body bags. And I'm going to talk about some of the issues that need to be talked about. My life and my information is based off of science and medicine and the science. And I put a lot of people in body bags overseas. And I've dealt with epidemics, dengue, chikungunya, Ebola, malaria, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when I tell you something, this is telling you about my experience and in my real life dealing with real patients and stuff. And I want people to know that I'm only 1% of the people on the planet that's certified in the medical management of chemical and biological warfare of patients. And that's just fact.
Awesome. So speaking of facts, I want to start this off very fundamentally, right? What I'd like for you is to tell our viewers what exactly is COVID and what is it not? Because if I poll 10 people right now, I would get people just walking on the street. I get a different from everybody. So what exactly is COVID-19?
Well, COVID-19, and I am a professor of pathogenic virology at the HPI Institute in Germany. I'm the only African-American there, and we've been around since 1941. This is where we discovered the polio vaccine. So when I tell you about the science, I'm going to want people to listen to me very clearly. The COVID is a coronavirus. It was discovered, this particular coronavirus, COVID-19, it really was not novel. The first two patients was in 1960. This virus has been around for 50 million years. It lives in bats. Bats are always the vectors of this particular COVID coronavirus. What happens is that somebody ate a bat, they drank the blood of the bat, and that virus jumped from an animal into an individual man. And that's how the virus started. This is how most infectious diseases, especially pandemics and epidemics, starts. We call that word spillage, spillover, or we call it accidental host. And so where we're at today is where we're at today, and this virus is lethal. And people need to understand that when we talk about viruses, we have a number called the R0 number, or reproductive number. This R0 number on COVID-19 is a 5.7, measles a 12, Ebola is a 1, influenza is 1.5. So this thing is, much, much more dangerous, much more infectious than influenza. When I tell people R0 number, what does that mean? For every individual that's affected with COVID-19, they can infect 5.7 people. That number can go from 5.7 up to 10, i.e. you're in a nursing home, concentrated people, you're in a prison, you're in a jail, you're in a school. That number can jump up to that type where you get one individual affecting 10 people, and you can imagine how quick this virus can spread.
Got it.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, please. It's a chat.
Doc, you know, people talk about social tracking all the time, and that's interesting because you should talk about the number of people you can infect. How good is the social tracking been, and in terms of helping us with control this disease?
Well, Mayor, when we talk about this particular virus, this virus is an RNA virus. This is the largest RNA virus on the planet. It's a positive sense RNA virus. And this virus has a lot of capabilities. It can infect people through respiratory. 60% of the transmissions through respiratory. You breathe in the air, the virus stays in the air for 14 minutes. 20% to 25% is through feces. You poop it out. And a lot of people didn't know that. That's a transmission, good hygiene. But so when we start talking about understanding how to track the infection, we need to kind of know where the source of the infection comes from an individual. And what we're trying to do with contact tracing, when we talk about pandemics, we have a thing called containment, or we call mitigation. When we do contact tracing, we're doing containment. We want to find out who's the source of the infection. Individuals on a plane, they get off the plane, they get sick, they go in the hospital system, and they have a rare disease. It could be Ebola, it could be Zika, it could be influenza, whatever. We will go back and we will look at the individuals that person came in contact with to make sure that we quarantine these individuals. Because like I said, with coronavirus, every time an individual is infected, they affect 5.7 people. And so that's contact tracing. But the problem here in the United States and worldwide, we have gutted our public health system. So really don't have people that are experienced to go out there and do this contact tracing. And this is one reason we're kind of behind the 8 ball and understand it. But contact tracing is a very important part of controlling the pandemic, Mayor.
Okay.
So if I understand you correctly, is the R not the 5.6 people?
You all know the R naught number is on the average, it'd be 5.6 people. So every time a person that's infected with COVID-19 times that by 5.6, they can infect 5.6 people, one person. The highest infectious disease on the planet is measles. Measles has a number of 12. So one person that has measles can infect 12 people. Ebola is the most infectious disease I've ever worked with in my life, and it's a 99.9% death rate. But Ebola is a very inefficient pathogen because it goes 1-to-1. It only can infect one person. That's through blood. It has to be in contact. Coronavirus is respiratory, measles is respiratory, influenza is respiratory.
So let's talk about that then in terms of protection. And I think this is, probably good for the mayor as well. Since it's, obviously spread so well through respiratory and in the air and, droplets, saliva, all of that. How effective are masks, right? Someone asked, should we really be wearing masks? Are masks effective? Are cloth masks no good? Is that just as good as not wearing anything? What's the skinny on the mask?
Well, the real deal on the mask is that my recommendation is that everybody should be wearing a mask when they're in an environment where there's high density and the probability of getting infected. I.e., you're going to Kroger store, you're going to Walmart, and I can guarantee you now in our society, you go to Walmart or Kroger, Costco, I can promise you there's a person there that's infected. Like I said, you breathe the air in, you cough out, the virus is in the air, you talk, the virus can be in the air for 15 minutes. The virus does not go 6 feet, folks. The virus goes 50 feet. It gets into the air conditioner unit.
Okay, wait, say that again. So 6 feet, the 6 feet social distancing, is that not a thing then?
6 feet, that doesn't work. I mean, once that virus is out there in the environment, it's out there. And that's why you have to have a mask. And that mask is a protection for you from the internal to the external environment. If somebody's infected, you're kind of controlling the virus inside the mask. If you walk through an air where the virus is in the air, it gives you some protection. I've dealt with serious diseases from Ebola to multi-drug resistant tuberculosis and stuff. Mask is part of one of our frontline biosecurity things that we use when we're in an infectious disease area. Folks, this is not a pandemic anymore. This is an endemic. The virus is into society. It's going to be here for a long, long, long time. And so you need to make sure you protect yourself. But the numbers came out yesterday, Mary, and you need to understand this, folks, is that they've already got our projection model from Harvard and Johns Hopkins. There will be another 100,000 plus people going to die from yesterday until August 1st. That's a fact.
Wait, so from now to August 1st, another 100,000 people are going to die
in the United States. And that's going to be a
So,
lot of
so,
people.
so Doc,
yeah, sorry.
let me ask you this. I've looked at the numbers globally, and the number of deaths are so high in the United States as compared to other countries. What do you attribute that to?
Well, first of all, one of the things is the actual testing. And no, testing is part of our containment. I don't have to explain that. You guys have common sense that our testing is completely inefficient. The CDC has failed on all parts of this from the beginning when they told other people not to make chemical assays, and they made them and their stuff failed. So they put us a whole month behind. And so at the end of the day, the reason why we have such a high death rate is because we have a big population. I've lost 18 of my friends in the last week that I worked for 20 years, doctors that are dead. One of my buddies, the anesthesiologist, died this morning. That's up to 19. These people left families, friends. These guys were medical people, and this disease is serious, and it's going to get worse. So when you talk about contribution of why the death rate is high in the United States, it's because people are infected. People didn't take it very seriously in the beginning. You can see what's happening in Wisconsin and Ozark. People drinking beers, smoking, having fun, giving each other high fives. I promise you in 14 days, they won't be laughing. That's a fact. It's going to get worse.
All right, so let me ask you about, since we're talking, so let me go back real quick. I want to clarify the piece about the mask. So if you're in a high density area, you should be wearing masks. So as cities are opening up, like City of South Fulton, whenever people are going out, they should have on masks. Does the type of mask matter?
To me, in my opinion, I don't think everybody should have an N95 mask. If you can get it, that is fine. You can get a regular surgical mask, that is fine. So for example, Mayor Edwards want to open up the county hall. My recommendation would be take temperatures on the front end, have a biodecontamination unit where people are decontaminated on the outside. They go in, they're wearing a mask. It could be an N95, it could be even something that somebody made. But as long as they have that protection, and in that building, they have great surface disinfectant, and also being able to make sure that people use the bathroom, that they have great sanitation in the bathroom, because we know if somebody uses a toilet and they flush it, you get feces all over the bathroom, and that tracks on people's shoes. And a lot of people don't realize that a part of the infection protocol or vector for COVID-19 is the bottom of people's shoes. You track coronavirus into the county hall, you're bringing for COVID-19, and people make air currents and it goes up in the air, you can breathe that in. That's why we tell people to take their shoes off at their homes. But in a situation where you're in a public place, you got to make sure you're doing something to disinfect people's feet.
Right. That's a whole nother reason to take your shoes off before you get into the house.
So Doc, let me ask you, another piece of data that's floating around that's come out, and that is the southern states are having larger issues of corona than states up north considerably. And also to add to that, talk to us a little bit about this concept of African Americans being more logically not having disease. Okay, talk to us about that, because I think people want to know that. That's a very scary factor to some people.
Dr. Mary Edwards, you want me to give you the Dr. Rowland version, or you want me to give you the Mickey Mouse version?
Give me the Dr. Rowland version, I think.
Be careful. We did this yesterday, and it.
Well, the reality, folks, is that let's talk about the incidence of COVID-19, why we have such an output of disease right now. And we can go back to hotspot. That really kind of started in Mardi Gras in New Orleans. Everybody went to Gras, everybody was infected. You had Chinese people all over the world, and everybody left Mardi Gras when they should not have had Mardi Gras. And they went back to Atlanta, they went to Albany, Georgia, they went to Mississippi, Alabama, all over, and they infected everybody. Period. End of story. There's nothing to talk about. That's fact. And then when we talk about why there's such a healthcare disparity or high mortality rate of Blacks with COVID-19, of the 100,000 people that have died from COVID-19, 20,000 plus are Black, period, end of story. People talk about healthcare disparities. I call it healthcare discrimination. And I know what happens that for the years that we have been people here in the United States, through the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, to all the horrific things they've done to people, Black people just do not trust the healthcare system. That's fact. There's nothing to argue about that. So when we talk about healthcare disparities, why do Black people having the consequences is that we're on the front lines. We're the people in the Walmart. We're the people that are working, are cleaning the streets. We're the person at McDonald's. You know, we're the persons at Amazon, et cetera. And we get exposure to that. And then what happens is that when an individual minority person gets infected with COVID-19, this is fact, this is not fairy tale. You go to the doctor and you have all the signs and symptoms of COVID-19. You have a runny nose, you lost your taste and smell, your nose, you're coughing, you have a fever, you have diarrhea, you have pain in your body. You go to them, they go tell you to go home and self-quarantine. You're not going to get the test. So you go home and you're home for 4 or 5 days and they find you in the bed dead. Or you go back to the hospital, then they put you on a ventilator. And 85% of people are not coming out of ventilators. Now the white guys, they go to the doctor, they get the test. And they know if they're positive, they know how to, they kind of have some guidelines on how to treat that. They are much aware than what we are. In Texas, came out the other day. In fact, most of the people in Texas that have been tested for COVID-19 are white. And the reason why is that these places that are testing and doing these tests are in the white areas in Texas. They're in the private clinics. They're not in the Black neighborhoods. They're not out in the rural area of Mississippi. They're not in rural Georgia, Alabama. They're in these localized places. And so we have to demand that the confirmational test, the test that they use, even though it's 50% unreliable, but we need to have an idea on that, on what's going on, Mayor Edwards.
Well, you know, a lot of people now, we talking about this whole concept of being asymptomatic. And it is a belief that if we test more people, then we kind of catch those people who have COVID, even though they do not have the symptoms. How do you think that's going to work in terms of getting us farther along than we have been?
Well, at the end of the day, in every disease spectrum, from Ebola to HIV, doesn't matter. Somebody's going to be asymptomatic. That's just evolution. So we have to deal with that. But we have to have a picture of what's going on in this society. We have to have confirmational tests. You know, the problem here is that we're so far behind the testing, it's ridiculous. When you look at the numbers you see now, it's not 100,000 people have died. It's probably 150,000 people have died. It's not 1.6 million, it's probably 3.5 million because the system is so far behind. And we do know what's going to happen, Mayor, is that right now, we're at 8% to 10% of the population has been affected with COVID-19 here in the United States, worldwide. Well, we're not going to get to what we call herd immunity until we get to 65 to 75% of people in the world and in the United States that are infected with COVID-19, and they might have some immunity. So you can imagine we're only at 10%. So we got 65% more people.
Way to go.
Right.
Okay, so let me ask you this. So we're talking about numbers here and data points, right? Because you just said the numbers are not right. You know, you think it's closer to 150,000 people that have been infected. And so now we have with several people who don't believe the numbers, right? We're seeing reports of, everybody's getting labeled with this COVID-19 when they come into the hospital and they feel sick. You just got COVID-19 and they're not doing the testing. So really, how reliable are the numbers that we're getting? And should we be making decisions based on what we see?
In my opinion, the numbers are not reliable. And this is where people have convoluted, put politics into science and medicine. And that's where it's gotten bad. And so people do not want to know the numbers. And all these folks that got all these confirmational tests that are inaccurate, they're given a false sense of the reality. If we were really on top of this, we would be taking the best science, having the best kit, and we would know how many people in the state of Georgia are infected, not just a picture of that, because that gives off a false sense of security. It's like, you have a burning building that's on fire and you put on some sunglasses. and you can't see. You go in that burning building. This is what's going to happen. And I can promise you, in 3 or 4 months, nobody's going to be laughing. And I'm going to be telling you, I told you so. This is what I'm the expert when it comes to this infectious disease stuff. This is not a game to play.
So right now, so the pretty much everybody, the states are all back open or are slowly starting to reopen. Is it too soon?
In my opinion, I think that we should try to do the best we can to open, because I understand that we cannot have a society that has a complete economic breakdown. We have to have tax revenues. We have to have kids going back to school. Some kids are being abused at their homes. I know in Mississippi, there are 3,000 kids in Lexington. They get their food from school lunches.
Right.
That's the food they get every day. So we have to control opening of our society, but it has to be smart, organized. You have to have a rollout. You just can't open up the floodgates. You want to see what's going to happen with the floodgates? You guys read the paper over the next couple of weeks and see what happened in Missouri with all them folks in Ozark at that swimming pool. That's going to be a great example of what's going to happen. So we have to open up the society, but you got to have great biosecurity and biosafety protocols in place. Washing hands, not wearing shoes, wearing a mask. You know, what are you doing for the air filtration unit in your building? What fan system? What are you using to wash your hands in the bathroom? What are you using to surface disinfect your buildings? And what are you doing when you're going home? Are you bringing it back home to your people? You got biosafety protocols for your folks at the house. Wearing a mask, not wearing a mask, air filtration unit. All the things you have to have in place so the mayor can open the city up, but he has to be smart about it, because I can promise you, next going to be coming down the road going to be all these lawsuits. Period. End of story. I go back and work at Denny's. I'm 19. You're getting sued. Ball game over with. That's the facts.
So take a step by step then through, right? So we'll take City of South Fulton, for example. We're going to reopen City Hall. So if I hear you correctly, it sounds like, okay, people come in, they take temperatures. Theoretically, it would be great if we had the decontamination units, which you mentioned on my show yesterday. You said that run $20,000 to $30,000, right, a pop.
Yeah, and this is the way of the future. Just like when we had 9/11, period. People didn't want to go through the full body. You got full body security systems in the airport. This is the future for at least the next 3 or 4 years. If not, you're not going to be able to function.
So decontamination unit, which I heard you mention yesterday too, Kroger you said like several thousand of those already.
Yeah, I bought 4,000 of them.
Okay, and then disinfectant, you mentioned a specific type of disinfectant. What would that look like in a commercial setting as opposed to a residential setting?
It'll be the same thing, but right now we have it for industrial use, FDA, EPA approved. The best surface disinfectant on this planet. Let me repeat it again. The best surface disinfectant that kills COVID-19, not a coronavirus surrogate, but the actual virus itself, and they have the science papers on it. It's called Extreme OptiClean Cube. That's the surface disinfectant. And the company that does that is extremecubes.com. Let me tell you folks how good this stuff is. We tested it March 18th, went to Detroit, nursing home. Everybody in there affected, 52 people. We did RT-PCR. We found COVID-19 on the toilets, underneath the toilet, the door handles, on the walls, on the beds, etc. Then we disinfected the whole building and there was no COVID-19. We came back and did another PCR test, a complete eradication, 120 times better than chlorine and natural.
So extremecubes.com, that has the Extreme OptiClean disinfectant you're talking about, right?
This is the way it is. You got to have it. If you want to survive, you need to be spraying it on your shoes. You need to disinfect your bathrooms, your buildings, Mayor. This is what you got to have. I'm just telling you where it's going, folks. This is high-tech technology.
And how often would that happen is the first question. And then employees returning back to work. This comes from Councilwoman Willis. Employees coming back to work. how often should they be tested? So first of all, is how often are we disinfecting? And then what do we do about employees?
Well, we know one of my responsibility as a biosecurity and counterintelligence individual, and I came to Vegas to work for one of the hotels to put in their biosecurity protocols. And one of the things you have to have is that the basic line of sanitation is, how does your people clean the building? Most people use Ecolabs. And so I went at 3 o'clock in the morning to all these hotels and I watched the cleaning crews, watch how they clean. I speak Spanish very fluently. And I watched them and I made recommendations in changing, because it comes down to the sanitation crew. Do they have the right chemicals? Are they really putting the effort into it? That is your first line, is how they cleaning the building at 3 o'clock in the morning. They cleaning it for 1 hour, or they cleaning it for 4 or 5 hours? And once the individuals get there, then you put in all your other measurements, fever, biodecon, are you wearing a mask, not wearing a mask, and sanitation, how are you cleaning your bathroom, how are you, if you're exchanging money, how are you cleaning your credit cards, how do you take money from the individual? Gloves, because gloves will give you a false sense of responsibility and also a false sense of security, because gloves can become the contaminator. Right. So changing the glove after each individual contact, are they wearing the same gloves? So these are the basic type of biosecurity protocols that you have to have.
So Mayor, let me ask you a question, because obviously this has affected the city. What have you seen from an economic standpoint of how COVID just affected the city of South Fulton? And then in this reopening phase, how do you feel like the city is going to bounce back and respond?
Well, let me just say this, is that South Fulton was one of the first cities that we instituted a curfew.
Okay.
When the pandemic first started. I thought that was a great move for us. However, the governor came back and put some legislation that kind of killed that for us. We believe in the city in social distancing, and we still believe in the fact of stay at home, shelter at home. We understand that economically things are going to open up, and we will be having a discussion on the possibilities this month with our city manager. But Doc gave you all the medical stuff, all right? But here's some stuff that people don't realize. Mm-hmm. Today and every Thursday, we've had a feeding. Councilwoman Helen Willis, she heads that up. And we've been feeding, Doc, somewhere in the area of 30 to 35,000 pounds of food every Thursday.
Wow, incredible. Wow.
Yeah, and we've been doing this, I guess, for the last month and a half. We hopefully that we may be able to kind of subside with it by the middle of next month. But people are lining up. We do 1,300 cars. And what we do, Doc, is that they come in, they flip the trunk, we throw the product in, they close the trunk, and they're gone. So at that, we're trying to maintain social distancing and all those kinds of things. Our restaurants has suffered extremely. They're trying to come back with a little bit now, but I want to tell you something. If you're working for one of our local restaurants as a waitress and you're making X amount of dollars, okay, guess what happened? When you left the business, you filed for unemployment. Unemployment usually around $300. But the person has kicked unemployment another $600. So you're making $900.
You're making more than, yeah.
Just on unemployment. If you're one of those type of jobs, you're not really excited about coming back right now, even though that is not something that's going to happen all the time. So that really hurts our restaurant industry. But it's glad to hear you. Some of the things you said today, I didn't realize about disinfecting and other things. And I think those things that we need to be putting out as a city. Our budget is going to be tremendously impacted. We ran this city last year on a budget of a proper right at $109 million. We're going to suffer a decline to somewhere in the area of 78 to $80 million. That's a tip. We've been fortunate right now that we are able to have people who are working at home and getting paid. But at some time in this, we're going to have to deal with issues of furloughs and things of that nature that's going to impact people. Where are they going? Are they going to add to that line of people we do on Thursday? You know, how are they going to protect and feed themselves? So this thing has a far-reaching effect into not only communities, but the governments in which we serve. So we as government, we're just trying to find a way to maintain the status quo as much as we can with what we're doing. We've been fortunate, but I can tell you right now, there's going to be a new normal, because what we're learning is from the people who are at home, Doc, who are doing things, it may not be a bad idea. You know,
Right.
we're looking at this whole issue of Zoom. All right,
Right.
Zoom meetings may be the way to go. So it's changing a whole lot of our rationale and what we thought we was going to do in the future. Is this new norm is saying that we may have to be more technical. I got in August, all our building permits in August will be online. So we're doing what we can. With this city believes. Someone asked me the other day, said, "Well, Mayor, are you going to open the pool up?" I got to tell you, my response was, "Well, if you can swim 6 feet away from another person and wear a mask, we might just go and open up tomorrow." but I don't think that's going to happen. This is a tough decision, because all of from a police perspective, you know what our #1 crime is right now? Domestic violence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People are staying home. They didn't have to stay home before.
Right.
So Michelle hasn't had that problem yet, but people are staying who hadn't stayed home before, and they're arguing. They ain't got a job. They don't know what's coming in, and domestic violence is jumping out of the window. South Fulton is right behind Atlanta when it comes for the number of COVID-19 cases. And I haven't seen yet, Dr. Rowland, where that number is declining. It'll go up 2.some% 1 week, and next week I'm up to 14. So of course we anticipated a lot of it because of the extra testing that's going on. Still not enough, but that's going on. But we have not seen a negative number and won't see a negative number sometime. So I would say if in fact we're going to open, we're going to still do those best practices.
Yes.
Do all those things that you talked about today, and some that I didn't realize, and I need to have conversations about them to protect those people who are coming to work. So that's going to be a conversation, Michelle, we're going to have next week as to what our target date is and how we're going to get it done. Our #1 priority is to keep people safe.
Mm-hmm.
Keep them safe, and that's what we want to do.
Yeah, and I mean, well, first of all, kudos to the city, because I do know that the city of South Fulton has done a fantastic job in, helping the businesses, trying to keep the businesses, especially the restaurants, as active as possible during this time. The South Fulton United Fund, which has been great. So I will say kudos to that. It's been amazing. But I know it's tough, right? And people got to work, people got to make money. This domestic violence thing you mentioned, I remember when we first started talking about shutting down the cities and the states. And the first thing people said was, what about domestic violence? And what about kids that are being abused at home?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And, that puts a whole nother perspective on sheltering in place. So I hate that is the #1 crime right now in the city. And I wish we had a magic wand to get rid of that. But speaking of magic wands, Dr. Rowling, let's shift really quick before I know we're closing in on time here and we want to take some questions from the audience. Vaccine. So I know what you think about the vaccine because you were very clear about it on the show yesterday. But let me ask you, because we're talking about a vaccine coming. So how soon do you realistically, right, facts here, think a vaccine will be available? And then should Black people, brown people race to the finish line to get it?
Well, thank you for that question. We talked about this yesterday. Well, they will come up with a vaccine in about 18 months, but it's not going to work. And the reason why it's not going to work because there's 40 different mutations right now. It might be 55 as I speak today of mutations. So you can't not come up with a shot of every possible different mutation. When we talk about healthcare disparities, folks, if they do come up with a shot, you make sure this is one time you want to have healthcare discrimination. You want to be the last in the back of the bus to get this shot. You let Trump, you let all Bill Gates, and they inject their grandchildren, let them inject them white boys in France and them white boys in England, and I'll read the white paper in a year after it being injected, and we'll see what the results are. Because I can guarantee when they get this vaccination, they're gonna line up all the Black folks, they're gonna inject you. It's gonna be free. But it's gonna be some horrors on that stuff. So I will wait to get this vaccine shot. I would be the last person in line, and you're definitely not gonna be injecting my grandchildren with this vaccination.
All right, so let me ask you this, because so we talk about this vaccination, but what about the people who say, okay, and I understand the piece about being asymptomatic and it not just being about you having it, but it infecting somebody else who might be immunocompromised, but people say, you know what, if I get it, I'm healthy, I'm sick for 2 weeks, the vaccine will come out, I'll get that. Like, what's really the big deal?
Well, the big deal is this, folks, of all the diseases that we've had, even with SARS and MERS, and we talk about the influenza outbreaks, the different about this particular disease is that even for me, and I've dealt with a lot of diseases in my career, real diseases in the real field, is that the thing about this is the variable is that you can die with this particular disease. That is the scary point about it. Yeah, you're right. You can get it. I can get it. But you might be one of them people we be putting in the body bags that you have a bad reaction, because this virus does not just affect the lungs. It affects your kidneys. It affects your heart, your lungs, your brain, your gastrointestinal tract. It affects your coronary arteries, your arteries in your leg. And now we're finding out today that Black people that are dying are having clots, strokes all through their
I
body.
was just about to ask you about that. I just saw that. Yeah.
And so Blacks are dying from strokes or these little, what we call, aggregation or embolus. This is part of the viral syndrome. And then the mayor, you need to understand, Mayor, and everybody out there, that now we have the pediatric syndrome that are killing our kids. Louisiana have 4 kids affected with Kawasaki syndrome just a week ago. So we need to make sure we protect our children in understanding that when they get a rash, when their tongues are red, they got a fever, this thing killing children 9, 7, 12 years old that are having heart attacks and strokes. So this is another consequence of this disease. So you can take that attitude where, you know what, if I get it, I get it. But trust me, when we put you in a body bag, you're just a footnote in history a week later. And so you got to take this stuff seriously. And Mayor, we have a guy named Uncle Kuski that the kids need to meet, because he's going to teach the kids how to wash their hands, how to put on their mask. It's a character. He's way better than Mickey Mouse, but he's kids friendly, because we keep talking to adults and we forget about our children. And I said earlier that a lot of the infections is caused by feces also. Wash your hands.
Right. And especially, we don't know exactly what the school situation is going to look like in the fall, but once kids are back in school, I mean, if that's a prime way that it's, carried, then that really could be a challenge, especially if we're dealing with this inflammation problem too, and on the pediatric side of things.
Well,
one of the problems in the school is that in transporting them to the school, Michelle.
Yeah, the buses, yeah.
Buses, you got 30, 40 kids on a bus,
right.
And that's problematic. So they're gonna have to deal with that.
And that's a good example of what we talk about, the R naught number. One person can affect 5.7 people bus, so it can be effective. But that's why you have to have your policies and procedures. You got to sit down with the kids. Kids, this is how you wear a mask. This is the new norm. Kids, you got to keep your fingernails cut. You got to wash your hands. This is how you do it. And we talked about this yesterday, Michelle. I want everybody to go to my website called saferhands.us, and they can get pediatric antiseptic hand wash for children. The kids need to learn the principles to be able to guide themselves in the future. And we will be going back to school. But the question is that, do you have baseline biosecurity protocols for the children? Washing hands. What are you doing? You know, are you wearing a mask? What is the census of how many people are infected? Because our next generation, or our children, is our future. And so we need to make sure they understand, because they're going through a lot of psychological problems with depression, anxiety, a different norm for them. And so we have to be able to talk to these little folks.
One of the things, Dr. Rowland, that we have a great concern with are the people who have no other alternative, and that they're called our first responders.
Right.
Who are out there every day doing what they're doing. I don't know if we're not giving them enough to protect them, and this is a conversation I'd like to have with you sometime offline, but we really, they're out there every day putting themselves on the line. Tell me what kind of things we can do more than just, washing their hands and things of that nature.
Well, Mayor, I'm gonna be honest with you. This is what the white people are doing, and I know I happen to be working with some of these folks. They've talked to me about it. So, for example, at the Raider Stadium, they're going to have a full body decontamination unit before you go in that football stadium. What you need to do for the police people in the jails in your county, you need to have a full body decontamination unit. So when these officers go through this thing, they're decontaminated on the outside. They get into the building, taking prisoners in there, they're decontaminated. Their shoes to the top of their head. This is what these units do. This is the investment for the health of your officers, your first line of responders. And so they're not taking that disease back home. If they already got themselves asymptomatic, we can't do anything about that. But we do know that we can decontaminate from the head down to your toe. You will be disinfected when you go in that building. But when you go back out in that environment, you're around people that virus is in the air, can get on your clothes. And that's one of the prime things that you have to have for the prisoners, to protect your officers and your correctional officers, is making sure everybody's being decontaminated every day.
Okay.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to just dive into this chat a little bit and see what questions we've got from the audience. So do you suggest all employees be tested before they come back to work?
In my opinion, in this day and age, everybody should be tested. And when we talk about tests, people make the mistake that they think they're going to have one test. You might have 4 or 6 tests in a year, because it might be 1 month you're negative and the next month you're positive. You might be positive and then you get over the disease and you can be reinfected again. So we have to have a good picture of the situation. If the person is working at the restaurant, maybe they're negative one day, next week they're positive. You take them out, they self-quarantine, they get better, they test, they go back to the job. But this is how you control that's how you control the infection rate. But like you said, Mayor, people do not realize, part of the COVID healthcare task force that I'm on, we understand that people that think they're collecting this unemployment check is going to run out. You're not going to have. So we have to get people back to work in a safe and a practical and with biosafety and bio protocols in place, security to protect people.
And how often would you test people? So you get tested before you come back to work. How often do you do it from there?
I would say, and after once you test individuals, goes back to the baseline, getting temperatures on people. And depending on that, and then maybe what you do is you implement a policy that people are tested once a quarter, maybe once a month, depending on what the resources are to be able to do that. But we have to have that. And a good example is what happens on the aircraft carrier. One couple people get infected, thousands of people infected on an aircraft carrier. And so we have to make sure that people are tested, because that person might be the symptomatic spreader of the disease. They might come to the job and infect everybody else by coughing. A great example is the guy in Detroit that was on the bus, and the lady was in the back of the bus coughing her head off, and he said, "Please stop that." She kept on coughing. He died 10 days later.
Yep.
That's
right. I remember seeing that story.
Yeah.
So to piggyback on that, then what about this antibody piece?
When you're talking about antibodies, you're talking about the actual test itself?
The test itself, yeah, and is there really a thing to being immune to it?
Well, when we talk about antibodies in clinical immunology, we have two types of immune systems. We have the humoral immune system, we have cell-mediated immune system. The humoral, what you're talking about is antibodies. And we make 5 antibodies, IgA, M, E, G, and D. Well, in this COVID-19, the most important antibodies we're talking about is IgM and IgG. IgM, you get the infection day 1. It could be this disease, syphilis, whatever the case. Your first 5 days of the infection is IgM. Then you convert over to IgG, which is your long-term antibodies. Antibodies are responsible for pathogens outside the cell. And so what we've seen so far is that we do not know if we have long-term IgG antibodies to fight this infection, period. Then we have the other process in the immune system called cellular mediated immunity. This is your T cells. These cells are responsible for fighting the pathogens inside the cell, cancer, viruses, etc. We do not know now if you get the infection that you do have immunity. I think I got it. I think I had the infection probably in the first week in January when I was in Amsterdam because I was sick. My daughter was sick for a month in New York early. So I think a lot of us have been exposed to it. A lot of us have had disease and we had good outcomes. But the bottom line at the end of the day is that if you get this disease, does it automatically mean that you have antibodies to fight the infection? Absolutely not, because there's 40 plus different strains out there. You can get COVID-19 strain 32, get over it. You know, you're thinking you're great and get COVID-19 strain number 3, which is more lethal, and you can have a reinfection. And we see that too. So this is kind of understanding the science. We're still early in the process, and we're going to be learning more as we get more science and more knowledge on the disease itself.
Is it true that CDC is knocking on doors to give you the antibody blood test? And how should people take that?
I would take it and be careful with that type of stuff because the CDC has been, they pushed the influenza vaccination and it's only 27% accurate, really probably 10%. So the other 85% of the people it don't work on. So why are you pushing something that doesn't work? Because I can promise you, if I had a 10% grade at F, you wouldn't let me work on you. So that's the reality. So when they're talking about getting data, what is that data being used for? And we know that the CDC was part of that Tuskegee syphilis experiment many, many years ago, where they were injecting Black people with syphilis in 1932, and that went to 1972. So do not be fooled that, and make sure that you're informed, you know the information, what are they using the information, and don't be a sheep being led to the slaughter.
And as this mutates, Dr. Rowling, you said there's only over 40 now, and there might be more as this continues. Does the virus get stronger? Does it get deadlier as it mutates?
Yeah, sometimes it does. In this particular virus, we know that the mutations in a gene called D614G. The mutations in a gene called D614G, which is a spike protein. This is the protein which allows that virus attached to the cells. It attaches to what we call the ACE2 receptor cells in your body. Well, folks, guess what? This virus can attach to your eyeballs. It can attach to your testicles, your gastrointestinal tract. It attaches to your heart, your kidneys, your lungs, your pulmonary, your coronary arteries. We have ACE2 receptors everywhere in our body, and this D614 gene has become much more efficient in attachment to our cells in our body. Great organism, great capabilities, phenomenal pathogen.
We've got a question in. How hard is it to get an antibody test?
Well, you see what's happening. Our country, we have drones. We can put people in space. People can talk politics, but we can't come up with a test. And we're supposed to be the greatest country on the world. Well, we found out that we really aren't the greatest country in the world with our technology. We don't have it. And that's why we have to invest in science and get more people interested in virology and also helping people develop these antibodies tests. But folks, if you're going to have a true antibody test, you have to have a test that has all the different possibilities. For example, when I work with dengue in the jungles of Peru, dengue has 4 different serotypes. One day you might have dengue 1, you might have dengue 4, but your assay test that you have to have to confirm dengue, you better have all 4 different strains of that dengue in your kit, or your kit's not going to work, period. I've seen that in the field before.
Got it. And so that's where clearly a lot of misses would be.
Well, the Asian strain is different. The Asian strain is different than the African strain. The West Coast strain of COVID-19 is different than what is in New York. So these strains are different in Sweden. They're different what's happening in Peru. This virus does not fit any of the phenomena. In Peru, it's summertime. It's summertime in Africa. Hundreds of thousands of cases. Brazil collapsing. Peru collapsing in the summertime. So people are getting complacent, think that this is seasonal. Well, okay, you be complacent, you will be in a body bag.
And, listening to the facts, and again, this is why I thought this was so timely, and kudos again to Councilwoman Gumbs for doing this, because we need facts. We don't need rhetoric. We don't need talking head opinions. We need facts so that we can make educated decisions, right, and how to move forward. You mentioned this, but I'm just going to circle back to this question. Do you connect the cardiac deaths to COVID, to so many people having heart attacks?
Oh, absolutely. And this is part of you can look at the pediatric syndrome where people have an acute inflammation in the vessels. You get inflammation in your vessels, you cut off the circulation to your heart. You have a heart attack. You have inflammation in your leg. You get a clot in your leg. You get inflammation in your brain. You can have a stroke. So this is part of the syndrome of this virus. This is why this is a multi-systemic virus, which has way more capabilities than influenza. You remember at the beginning, people telling you, oh, this is like the flu. No, this ain't like the flu. This is a serious disease, a serious virus. And this thing is going to keep evolving. And it's because of natural selection. Its job is to stay alive. And that's the history of this genetics of this RNA virus.
All right, so we've got one final question here, and we can go ahead and issue closing remarks. But when do you think it's a realistic time frame to say, okay, you can travel now, you could get on a plane, you could travel across the country? How far along are we from that?
I think right now, because I think people have the understanding of what they're dealing with. If you have a good, 7500 mask that you can get on a plane and fly, I see that. If you're washing your hands in the airport, I see that. If the planes are really, truly decontaminating the planes, and we know how planes are, plane comes in late, they got 10 minutes aboard everybody. They're not cleaning the bathroom or the seats. The planes are some of the most nasty vector carrying places. The bathroom floors, the bathrooms, people cough and it goes in the air vent. People poop and they soil the seats on the airplane, and you sit there and you put your hand in it. You touch the magazine on a plane, is the most nastiest vector thing on the plane, with everything from E. coli, you name it, salmonella, viruses, influenza. The magazine, touching the table tray on a plane will kill you. That's how nasty these things. And so if the planes and airplanes have great protocols now, I will fly. But we already know the reality behind that. And we can just look at, I guarantee you, they're not sterilizing the bottom of people's shoes getting on them planes. Fact.
And you probably, in fact, and you'd probably for hotel rooms or Airbnbs or any of this, right?
Absolutely. You think about hotels, and I'm a diamond with Hilton. I'm a VIP. I stay in hotels 156 days a year for the last 15 years all over the world. And we know that bathrooms in the hotels are nasty in your room. They do a cursory cleaning and stuff. You can look underneath the bed at a hotel. So you can imagine a person comes in with the shoes, tracking COVID-19 all on the floor. Maybe they spit on the floor, and that virus is sitting in that spit just waiting for you to touch it, and you can get infected that way.
Well, I think that paints a pretty clear picture, Dr. Rowling.
Yeah, I think it does.
All right. Well, listen, thank you so much for coming on and spending this last hour with us. This has been eye-opening for me. I'm hoping, Mayor, did you get some good information out of this?
Well, listen, and like I said, I want to get with Dr. Rowland offline sometime, Doc. We get together and talk some more and take a deeper dive into what you suggest as I try to deal with this issue of reopening.
Well,
So definitely want to get with you on that.
Mayor, I would love to sit down and talk to you anytime. My phone is available for you 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. My job, this is my moment to make sure I save people and save people's lives. And I'm gonna give you the best information out there in the world so you can make good decisions, because we have to protect people. If we save one person's life, we've done our job. And it takes
Yes.
people to have leadership, and they have to have an understanding. They can't have an attitude. You got to take your ego out of this, because I promise you, when we put you in a body bag, you won't have any more ego, period, end of story. And like I say, I have the experience and the knowledge and the wherewithal to give you the best information and best protocols, Mayor.
All right. Well, that's what I want to do. You've been straightforward. I mean, to the point of almost scary. But that's what we need to know. I mean, you got to, let people know the facts. It's nothing to play with. So I just want to thank Councilwoman Gumbs. Thank you for having this, and to this outstanding moderator that you have chose.
Don't try. You were mean to me in the beginning.
Many people all,
Try to butter me up.
many people all over the country want this young lady to be moderator, but we're good to have her. So I feel great that we did get her. And Dr. Rowland, what can I say? I mean, you brought it to us, and the truth is always something that's going to help us, and we need to hear the truth. No matter how bad it sounds or how scary it sounds, we need to know the facts, and I think you did that for us today.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor, and everybody, Councilwoman Gumbs and Michelle. My job, I got to tell everybody, and I got to tell the congressional folks, is that I can give you the Dr. Rowland version. I can give you the Mickey Mouse. I can make you feel good, tell you to drink 2 cookies, eat 2 chocolate chip cookies, and drink some milk. You're going to give over COVID-19. And I'm lying to you, make you feel good. Or I can tell you the truth, because in my world, I've seen babies born without brains. I've seen people's faces, disease in their jaw is sticking out of their face, eyeballs popping out of their head because of diseases that are eating their faces away. But if people saw this stuff in my world, the Frankenstein looks that diseases do to you, you will have a different appreciation for this. Because you can't see it, people, it's no important. People are complacent. But I can promise you this virus is out there waiting to get the next victim. And our job is to mitigate the disease by having good biosecurity protocols and understanding situation awareness, everybody. And thank you guys for having me on.
No, thank you so much. Thank you, Mayor Edwards. Thank you, Dr. Rowland. Thank you, Sora. I always want to get back into my AKA mode. Thank you, Councilwoman Gumbs, so much for having me. This was enlightening, and I think we provided a lot of great information today.
Well, girl, you better put some Afro sheen on that hair.
Oh, God. I can't get up all day. I mean, like, that's the mayor's job to be mean to me. You're supposed to be nice to me.
Well, you need some Afro sheen. Your scalp is dry.
Do I really need Afro sheen? I mean, geez, and do people even is Afro sheen even still a thing? What is this?
You look beautiful. You look beautiful.
Thank you.
It does not cure COVID-19.
It does not do that at all. I'll pass it back to you, Councilwoman.
So really quick, I just want to thank you all. Like the mayor said, Dr. Rowland scared me half to death. I think the safest place right now is inside my house.
Yeah. And it might not be so safe if you guys are wearing your shoes in there.
So again, I hope that the residents and of the city of South Fulton find this very enlightening. They know the truth, and will begin to make those changes, and hopefully more of them will go out and get tested. So again, thank you. We may need to do a part 2 series. So I appreciate it so much for you all coming together. This was fantastic.
Thank
you so much.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
We OGs.
Bye, Michelle.
No, you are OGs. I'm a YG. I'm not OG.
Bye, Michelle.
Bye, Mayor Edwards. It's always a pleasure.
We'll get together. I'll get the information.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Good evening to you.
Bye-bye, guys.